We are all one. Only egos, beliefs, and fears separate us. That's what Nikola Tesla said. And he wasn't just saying that. When you look at the latest research with quantum physics and everything else that we know about life and how existence operates, is that everything that is, everything that has ever been in existence and everything that ever will be, it all emerges from the same place that they call the quantum field. Now, without going into a ton of depth, think about yourself and who you are. Most people have a concept of themselves that is based on it's a combination of thoughts, emotions, memories, sensations, all the narratives associated with the experiences you've been through. But it's not an objective reality. It's more subjective because it's not about the experiences you've been through, but it's the interpretation and evaluation of those experiences that has caused you to relate to yourself, others, and life as a whole the way that you're currently relating to life. The way that you're relating to life has determined the results of your life. That's why the number one predictor of success in today's standard, especially a capitalist country, the standard of success can be determined by the zip code in which you grew up in. Because that determines the demographic, that determines the type of knowledge and understanding that you had access to through your parents and the patterns that they established for you in childhood. The majority of people think that they are choosing the life that they want, when really it's not a choice at all. It's more so a reaction based on how they've been programmed and hardwired, the patterns that are determining all the thoughts, the emotions, the behaviors, and everything else in their life. The beautiful thing about realizing that is that you can give yourself a lot of grace because of the fact that everybody is doing their very best within the limits of their own awareness. Carl Jung said that until you make the unconscious conscious, it'll direct your life and you'll call it fate. And with the latest research in the third wave of psychology, what we've realized is that our behavior and sustainable change and evolution for you to be able to grow into the 2.0 version of yourself, or the version of you that's capable of realizing a life that you actually value and creating that life, has to go beyond those patterns. Most people are trying to combat all of the patterns. Think of these patterns like thoughts, emotions, memories, sensations, urges. Thoughts and emotions, foundational ones at least, are going to be what creates your subconscious beliefs. Most people, they identify as the internal content. You could call all of this a blanket statement of internal content. That's what it is. Most people identify with the internal content as it. They think that they are the voice in their head. They think that they're the thoughts. They have to argue with them, believe or disbelieve. They think that they are the emotions and the sensations that are created in the body, and that's what's driving and determining their behavior. What third wave psychology is all about is helping people realize that no, this is the internal content, and inner mastery is really the key for you being able to go beyond those patterns, to establish a new pattern for yourself, a new way of being, a new life, a new version of you. Going back to quantum physics, we are all fundamentally potential that has the ability to be filtered through those egoic structures. That's why Nikola Tesla said that egos, beliefs, and fears are the only thing that separate us. It was profound when he said that, because it is. We're all one, only egos, beliefs, and fears separate us, which means that who you are fundamentally is potential. Potential that has the ability to be expressed however you choose, but because you don't know how to access your own power to choose, because you haven't mastered yourself internally, you're stuck reacting to programs. And so anytime you try to go beyond those, you're going to feel like an imposter. You're going to sabotage your success, and the pendulum swing will go back and forth over and over, and then you'll beat yourself up because of it. The issue isn't that you deal with inconsistency or you don't have the right discipline or the right supporting beliefs in your life. Fundamentally, the key to healing and realizing your true potential, so you can choose to collapse that potential however you want, however you value, is not about changing all the content. It's about creating enough space so you can change the relationship to the content of your experiences. What I mean by that is that we don't need to dissolve limiting beliefs. We don't need to try and combat all of the stuff going on inside. What needs to take place is we need to change our relationship so that we no longer identify as the content, but we identify in our true nature, which is pure consciousness, who can hold the content within our awareness so that that space naturally gives us the ability to choose to engage with the content or to choose something completely different. The choice is no longer dictated by the internal content. That's at the foundation of being able to realize your potential. Now, I call that inner mastery. Inner mastery, simply put, is when you learn how to change your relationship to the internal content of your experiences. There are 6 disciplines, based on the latest research, there are 6 disciplines necessary for you to develop this space and create inner mastery for yourself. That's what I wanted to go through with you. I created the 6 disciplines of inner mastery based on several decades of research and experience, applying them to my own life, helping other clients go through this as well to develop these skills for themselves. The 6 disciplines of inner mastery is not, I don't want you to think of them like a standalone individual skills that you develop. I want you to think about this like a holistic framework to knowing yourself that allows you to then develop the skills to master your potential so that you can choose to collapse that potential however you want in service of the life that you value. That being said, the 6 disciplines of inner mastery, they form an integrated developmental system designed to cultivate 3 things: psychological flexibility, conscious self-direction, and values-based action. These disciplines are not isolated skills like I mentioned. They operate as a unified operating system for personal growth, which means that each discipline addresses a core human yearning, which I'll describe in a little bit, but that human yearning typically is untrained, and what will happen is our ego or our mind will take that yearning and try to satisfy it, but it leads to forming rigid and avoidant patterns. What the 6 disciplines do is they take this human yearning, they satisfy it, but they shift from avoidant and rigid patterns to being able to develop corresponding abilities that enable sustainable personal evolution. Think of it like being able to understand the exact markers and science behind expansion versus contraction. This framework is completely grounded in the latest research within psychology, third wave psychology to be specific. It's supported by behavioral science, neuroscience, developmental psychology, and contemplative traditions. I wanted to make sure that it was extremely comprehensive so that it encompasses everything from spiritual to mental and physical realms or categories or domains. That being said, together the 6 disciplines, they essentially enable you to live with clarity, resilience, depth, and intentionality. So, what are they? The 6 disciplines are as follows: diffusion, self as context, acceptance, presence, values, and committed action. I'm going to dive into each one, which will elaborate on each of these and go into each human yearning. Okay, discipline number 1. This is diffusion. What I mean by diffusion, I'll explain a little more in depth, but it's helpful to understand that as human beings, we have these natural yearnings based on how we've evolved as humans. One of them is the yearning for coherence and understanding. And to give a little bit of context here, one of the greatest disservices to humanity is that we don't know ourselves. As I go throughout these disciplines, we're going to be talking about these yearnings so that you can better understand your ego and yourself, because the whole point here is to evolve your ego. So the first human yearning that I want to talk about is coherence and understanding. Essentially, this is the desire that our mind has to make sense of our experiences. We want to make sure that there's coherence and understanding from our past to our present, so that if we understand the pain of our past and what it meant as far as our experiences, we interpret and evaluate them to know what it meant about us, so that then we can project and anticipate how to survive when it comes to the uncertainty of the future. If there's anything in the present moment that relates to the pain of my past, my mind is then going to project it into the future, anticipate it happening again, so that then it can protect me and avoid the pain reoccurring. Obviously, this is very primal and essential for our own survival and evolution as a species, but when this yearning goes untrained, what ends up happening is that it produces rigid self-stories. These are all of the subconscious beliefs that are typically driving our own self-image and concept of ourselves. Things like, I'm broken, I'm flawed, I'm not good enough. Whatever the story is in your mind, whatever belief of inadequacy that you have that limits your potential, know that it's because this yearning for coherence and understanding has been untrained. The beautiful thing is that you can train it. Defusion is the skill that trains it. So essentially, it helps us to learn how to relate to our thoughts as transient mental events, rather than literal truths or commands. Most people are stuck in their heads, believing or disbelieving their thoughts, arguing with the narrative. And if anybody goes against that narrative, then we need to argue our perspective versus theirs. Or rather, I should say perception. When we learn how to diffuse from our minds, we are able to become the observer of our thinking without being dominated by the thoughts themselves. The core opportunity here is that the untrained mind fuses with thoughts, mistaking internal narratives for reality. This fusion leads to self-judgment, rumination, rigidity, and compulsive problem solving. Or, in other words, viewing your life as a problem to be solved rather than an experience to be lived, as the famous German philosopher said. Soren Kierkegaard, I believe was his name. But I want to explain really quickly, as you see in this document, I'm going to talk about some of the symptoms of having this yearning untrained. And so if you have not learned how to train this yearning for coherence and understanding through diffusion, then you're going to deal with some of these symptoms. The symptoms are going to be needing clarity before you act, treating life as a problem to be solved, believing your thoughts too literally, living mentally instead of experientially, and needing to be right in order to feel secure. Off to the side, I've expanded on each of these, so if any of these resonate with you, go ahead and go through. You can pause the video and read in depth for each one of these. But I'm going to leave that. I'll do this for each one. I'm not going to read through them just because it'll take too long. But those are some of the symptoms when it's untrained. The shift here that takes place when we develop the skill of diffusion or the discipline of diffusion is that we shift from this yearning for coherence where it shows up in a rigid form, meaning all the narratives and the stories in your head. So an example would be, I have thoughts about myself, about my own worth. These are going to be coherent in form based on my previous experiences and how I've interpreted and evaluated those experiences. When we learn how to diffuse and develop that discipline, we shift the yearning for coherence from form to function. So instead of believing our thoughts literally, we're able to look at our thoughts and the function that they play in our ability to live a life that we value. So for instance, we can choose if there's thoughts that arise that are not in service of the life that we value living, then we're able to not buy into those thoughts, to not give them more weight than they deserve because they're just a thought. We don't have to believe or disbelieve, but we can choose to entertain and use the thoughts that are actually functional. And so this is functional coherence. It's going to shift our yearning for coherence and understanding from form to function. What is useful in living one's own values? This enables us to essentially choose our thoughts that support the life that we value. The purpose of this discipline is to create psychological distance from our thoughts so that choice becomes possible again. Because again, without it, then we're fused with our mind And that's just a matter of determinism and reaction based on our programming. The results that you'll experience when you learn this discipline and you develop it is that you'll have greater mental clarity. You're going to be able to reduce the self-judgment that you experience. You're going to be able to increase your own creativity and wisdom. And on top of that, my favorite personally is that you'll experience peace of mind, maybe for the first time in your life. I've included skills that I walk people through, or exercises that I walk people through with the clients that I work with. Don't worry about these. There's no linked exercises or anything like that, but that's for other use cases. Discipline 2. This is the self as context, and it comes because one of our deepest and most human yearnings that we have that connects us all and that we can all relate to on a really profound level is this yearning for belonging and connection. This yearning for belonging and connection is really the need to be seen, cared for, and included in our social groups. Again, we're social beings, but when this is untrained, this yearning ends up becoming a lot about ego protection, self-esteem chasing, comparison, or fear of rejection. And I know that we all can relate to this in some way, shape, or form. But what ends up happening is that when we're fused with our thoughts, this concept that we have of ourselves because of all of our experiences over the past, how we've interpreted and evaluated those, and the beliefs that we develop because of them, that internal content, when we're viewing ourselves as the content, when we're identifying as the content, I refer to that as the self as content. That's how we experience ourselves, as the content, who we think we are because of those narratives and self-stories. So with the self as context, what this is about is helping you develop the ability to not only create space through diffusing from your mind, but then in that space, we can experience ourself as the observing awareness behind the thoughts and emotions, memories and sensations, behind all of the internal content, right? Rather than identifying with them. The core opportunity here is that because we've fused with that self-concept or the story about ourselves, who we think we are, then we must be constantly defending, protecting, and validating that narrative, that concept, that persona. And so it leads to a lot of lying. It leads to a lot of disconnection. Specialness becomes really important to us because if I can just be special enough, then I'll fit in. So it can be accurately described as experiencing yourself as content, like I was saying. But what ends up happening is that when this goes untrained, the symptoms in our life is that we need a certain self-image to feel like we belong. So this is going to be all of your people who deal with imposter syndrome, which we've all been there at some point, right? Anytime we go outside of that self-concept, that's all imposter syndrome is going into a new environment, trying to do things that are outside of that self-concept. And so typically we'll sabotage our growth so that we can continue to stay coherent within our own self-concept. So you can see how these disciplines bleed together. But the other one would be managing or hiding parts of yourself to stay accepted. So a lot of lying, defending, justifying, validating our persona, right? We create this mask so that we can be accepted by our social groups, and then anything that doesn't fit that mask becomes our shadow. And it's not just the things that we would deem as bad or reject and judge as not good, but it's also all of the things that are our untapped potential. This is the Mr. Nice Guy who has no capacity for danger or directness or being honest when the situation might call for it, if he needs to defend himself or his family for whatever legitimate reason. Another symptom is that you make yourself a story for who you are, or you mistake yourself as the story rather than, again, connecting with your true self. Another one would be comparing yourself to others to locate your own worth. This is putting others down in order to feel good about yourself, or anything that doesn't align with your persona that is within your shadow gets projected onto other people. We judge them as being bad because we see those parts that we deny about ourselves. And so then we have to put them down to feel better about ourselves and our own self-concept. It also leads to feeling alone, even when you're not by yourself. And I think that's one of the most challenging ones for people, is that they deeply yearn for belonging and connection, but because this is untrained, they live in a manner where they could be surrounded by people who love them, but yet they feel completely alone because nobody really knows who they are. And I would even say that they don't know themselves either. The shift here that takes place when you develop this discipline is beautiful, because perspective taking reveals a deeper transcendent self. This self, there's some characteristics that I like to bring your awareness to, which is the fact that it is stable, it is continuous, and it is inherently connected, not only to other people, but connected to the life around you. And so when you're able to diffuse and then recognize that you are not the content and experience yourself as context within the context of that, then it can be extremely eye-opening and life-changing for most of the people that I've seen, as well as myself included. What ends up happening is that it loosens the grip. The whole purpose of this discipline is to further loosen the grip of the internal content, all the stories, the narratives, so that we can reconnect with consciousness and awareness itself. Some of the beautiful effects of developing this discipline specifically is that you'll experience a genuine self-esteem, a deep sense of self-confidence, where you're soft, you're grounded, you know yourself. I believe it was Socrates who said, knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom. And it's beautiful because you're more open, you're more resilient and adaptable. The other effects is that you have a deeper connection, not only to yourself, but to other people and the world around you. And not just other people in the world, but also God. However you define God, I don't really care how you relate to that word or term. Call it whatever you want, universe, source, I don't really care. The fact is that you're going to experience much more of a deep and profound connection to that higher power, whatever it looks like for you. The other effects is that you'll dissolve a lot of the stories of inadequacy, these limiting beliefs that people will talk about, those will dissolve as a byproduct of creating that space, and it'll reduce your defensiveness because you don't feel the need to defend a story that isn't true anymore. And then there's also a deep felt sense of belonging as a birthright. There's no more needing to prove yourself or needing to be good enough or work hard enough to be special and different and accepted. That all fades because you recognize your own worth is inherent by virtue of your being alone. This is one of my favorite disciplines personally. It's made the most impact in my own life and equally has been profound for the clients that I've worked with. But I love this one, and I wanted you guys to be able to see this because this isn't something that you can intellectualize. Although you can grasp the concept, this is one that you really have to comprehend through experience by creating that space and sometimes experiencing yourself for the first time authentically. Real quick, for the symptoms when this is untrained, I forgot to show you the expanded list, so go ahead and pause the video if you need to, if you want to see more in depth on each one. I believe that should show it. Yeah, there we go. Cool. Discipline 3. Acceptance is key, and you'll see how all of these start to blend together, but we have a deep sense of yearning to experience life and not just have a full range of experiences, but we want experiences that make us feel. So you'll see this manifest in children or even in adults as teenagers. I don't know if anybody went to haunted mansions or anything like that, but we want to feel experiences and a full range of them. So this is watching scary movies. This is wanting to jump off of a cliff or go skydiving to feel something. There's lots of studies where people were put into a room by themselves or with a group of people, and the whole goal was to make them think they were there for one reason, but the real reason was to make them bored so that they would touch a device on the table. This device on the table would shock them. And they noticed that people would rather experience pain than feel boredom. So we want a full range of emotions, right? There's this deep yearning for us to experience life to its fullest capacity. That being said, when this goes untrained, this yearning, when it goes untrained, it ends up being one-sided, where we want to feel good, but not bad. And so a good example of this would be somebody who falls into emotional rigidity, where they're unwilling to embrace discomfort. And so because they want to avoid discomfort, they seek only pleasure. There's a lot of that is destroying people in today's day and age. Acceptance is crucial because if we don't have the discipline of acceptance, which I define acceptance based on its root, the etymology of the word means to take something without any degree of resistance. So to take something completely. That doesn't mean condoning or anything like that, but to simply put it, acceptance is willingly embracing what is. That means all the thoughts, the emotions, the memories, and the sensations within us without any degree of resistance, which is really challenging for the ego. And when we don't have acceptance, what ends up happening is that we become fused again with the thoughts and emotions because we don't want to feel bad and we don't want to experience negative emotions that we've labeled as negative. The core opportunity here, though, is that the mind attempts to eliminate pain through avoidance, thinking that that's going to be the solution to pain. Let me get rid of my pain by avoiding it through resistance. The problem with that is that in the short term, it works, which tricks us. But in the long term, it only creates our suffering. Suffering, when you look at the origin of that word, it connotes this idea that we are unwilling to carry something that we see as being too much, or just we don't want to bear it. And so there's this initial aversion to the experience of pain. And when we don't want to experience the pain, when we avoid it, that struggle that we have with our pain is what creates our suffering. When this is untrained, some of the symptoms you'll see in people is that they need to feel good in order to function. Avoiding or suppressing uncomfortable emotions, treating emotions as problems to be fixed rather than experiences to be felt, and disconnecting from bodily sensations in an effort to disassociate and not feel. Oscillating between control and emotional overwhelm, to name a few. As far as the expanded list, you can go in and read through these for any of those that resonate with you. The shift that starts to take place as you develop acceptance is that it restores our capacity to feel broadly and deeply without resistance. The importance of this and the whole purpose of this is so that we can receive pain as information and data. And what'll happen is that when we receive it as information and data, we'll be able to learn from it and extract the lessons and the wisdom within that pain and those experiences, rather than something that we need to eliminate. We'll be able to learn and grow from those experiences. The results or effects of developing acceptance, not only are you not going to fall back into fusion with your own mind, but you're going to have greater emotional flexibility and resilience. You'll also have reduced impulsivity. This is delayed gratification, which is absolutely necessary for you to realize the vision that you feel called to in your life. It's also an expanded capacity to learn from your experiences and extract the wisdom, like I had mentioned, so that you can continue to progress and look at what is real, become more aware of how you feel called or value engaging in life in a meaningful way. Discipline number 4. Presence is massive. Every single human being yearns for orientation. This is one of the pivotal ones that you'll notice as I give some examples here. But our yearning for orientation is really a need to know where we are in life and what matters right now. So if you've ever remember the transition out of high school or that pivotal moment in your teens into your early 20s, a lot of people feel disoriented, especially if you didn't go to college or you didn't follow the crowd or whatever your social groups were doing. There's a chance that you wondered, am I falling behind? Like, I feel like I'm behind. I feel like I need to be in a different place. Maybe I should be further ahead in life. Some of you might be feeling that in your 20s and 30s. if you're experiencing a lack of presence, what'll happen is it leads to disorientation. But when this goes untrained, we end up worrying in our minds. It leads to a lot of ruminating thoughts and ultimately disorientation, like I was mentioning. The discipline of presence is so crucial because essentially presence is conscious, flexible attention to the present moment in service of a life that you value living. Whenever we're disconnected from the present, whether it's our emotions that we're experiencing, whether it's the context of our environment, it doesn't really matter. Whenever we're disconnected from the present moment, we don't have access to the data-rich environment in the present moment. If we avoid all of our feelings and we stay disconnected, we can't learn from them. So you can start to see how presence is really, really important, because if you can stay and remain present with your own experiences internally and with your outer experiences, and you can see how acceptance helps us to stay present, then it allows us to access a lot more data so that we can actually orient ourselves. Because otherwise, we'll become preoccupied with the past and the future, and it'll narrow our awareness and deprive us of the experiential data in the present moment, like I was mentioning. As far as the symptoms, whenever this is untrained, you'll notice by the fact that you use thinking to feel oriented, whether it's ruminating about the past, wondering if you should have done things differently, or worrying about the future, getting stuck in the past or future loops, living on autopilot, difficulty directing attention intentionally, and feeling disconnected from what's happening now are all symptoms of this. As far as the expanded lists, let me put this up so you guys can see. The shift that takes place as you develop the discipline of presence is that you're able to access mindful attention, and that mindful attention restores accurate orientation to the internal landscape and the external environment. The whole purpose of this discipline is, again, to access the rich data of your environment and lived experience. It makes your life a lot more fulfilling and a lot more, vital, because you're able to satisfy that yearning for orientation, and then you also get to experience and feel life more fully. But some of the results that I love are improved focus and clarity. If you've ever wondered, why can't I focus? You can see these all cascade together, but you'll have improved focus and clarity, greater situational awareness, and enhanced learning and adaptability based on the present moment, because that's where all of the most important information is here and now. Discipline 5, values. I absolutely love this one because it hits home for me personally. I've had a lot of experiences with this one, as I'm sure a lot of you have. All of us yearn for self-directed meaning. That means that we want to be able to know that our life and its direction is our choice and nobody else's. When I was 19 years old, there was a lot of pressure for me to go on a service mission for my church. And I did not want to do that because I realized that I would be making that choice and sacrificing 2 years of my life for other people that I didn't even know what I believed or what I wanted my life to be about. And so all I knew and what I became very aware of is that I yearned to have a sense of self-directed meaning in my own life that was my choice and nobody else's. So that's the yearning for this one, self-directed meaning. But when it's untrained, what it ends up turning into is compliance, people-pleasing, or attachment to external rewards. If I would have done that just to fit in by my family, that easily could have happened, and it happens to a lot of people. Values are critical because when we develop this discipline, essentially we're able to shift that whole trajectory. So for instance, values I define as chosen qualities of being and doing that give life meaning. They're like directions, not destinations. I think that people confuse this part a lot, where they think that values are like goals that you can achieve or a destination that you can arrive at. That's not how values work. Values are like directions. The biggest difference would be if I want to move in the direction of east because I value being a certain way, like loving, There's always more east to travel. There's always more east to do. I never arrive at east. And even at times in my life where it feels like I'm going west or north or south, sometimes it's in an effort to learn how to redirect myself in the direction of east. And so the beautiful thing about values is that the opportunity for us is to no longer be fused with the idea of values being goals or achievements or social approval, like socially compliant wants and shoulds, but rather those things lead to emptiness and burnout. But when we start to clarify our values, we no longer experience that. So an extreme example that I gave earlier was the tech billionaire who reaches the pinnacle. Typically, that's driven by these socially compliant wants and shoulds, and all their goals, they realize after they achieve them that they're meaningless. And it wasn't really what they were wanting within themselves. That's why, part of the reason at least, why they feel empty and hollow. Some of the symptoms that you'll know you're dealing with this, if it's untrained, is that you're chasing goals to feel fulfilled. Living by shoulds instead of choice, measuring meaning through achievement, cycling between gratification and emptiness, or feeling uninspired despite outward success that you've experienced, like I just mentioned in that example. When it comes to the expanded list, let me pull this up for you guys. The shift that takes place, though, as you develop your values, just to clarify this all, is that you're able to reconnect to motivation that's intrinsic rather than external. So what I mean by that is clarifying your values will attach your motivation systems in your biology and your neurochemistry and everything. It'll attach it to the process and the journey rather than the outcome and the achievement, which is beautiful because then the reward is given based on the actions that we take. So we have an unlimited source of motivation when we hack our system in that way and clarify our values. The whole purpose of this discipline is to establish conscious self-direction through value-based actions and provide a stable, renewable source of motivation. The result that people experience and the effect in their life is that they have increased vitality and engagement with life. You don't necessarily need an alarm anymore because you can wake up excited, knowing how you value being and what your life is about. You have a lot of clarity of purpose and emotional richness and vitality in daily living. Discipline 6, committed action. This one's pretty simple. I don't want to try and oversimplify by saying just do it because I don't think that's helpful or useful at times. But if you want to understand the inner workings of your own nature, then you have to understand that this discipline is important because we all yearn for competence. Competence is really about being able to act effectively and skillfully or usefully in the world. There's something within us where we want to be competent and we want to provide value in a competent way. When this is untrained, the yearning becomes about perfectionism, procrastination, and workaholism. And you see this pervasive in hustle culture mentality and everything, which I don't think that is very helpful because usually people are driven by the yearning for competence combined with other beliefs of inadequacy that is driving them to try and achieve more to finally feel like they're good enough. But the thing about this discipline is that committed action is an ongoing process of building greater habits of value-based behaviors with flexibility, persistence, and self-compassion. It's not about beating yourself up. It's not about berating yourself to do the thing. It's about understanding yourself well enough so that you can flexibly realign moment by moment. Because the core opportunity here when this is untrained is that change is typically abandoned when mistakes, discomfort, or delayed gratification appear. This is usually where progress stops for people. This is why all of the New Year's resolutions drop off after the first few weeks, because they can't sustain change over a long enough time horizon because they don't know themselves well enough. I've been there. I know intimately what this looks like. As far as the symptoms go, when you are struggling with committed action, you will be tying your self-worth to results or productivity. You'll swing between procrastination and overworking, which leads to burnout or just rumination if you're on the procrastination end of things. You'll let perfectionism block your momentum, or you'll be forcing persistence without alignment. And if you've ever done that, you know how miserable that is and how it quickly leads to burnout, like I was saying. The last thing would be you have difficulty sustaining value-based habits. A good example of this would be if I value being loving in my relationship. Somebody does something that triggers me, and now all of a sudden I'm back fused with my mind and my emotions. I'm not present at all. I'm in my head, defending my perception and ego, and all of my beliefs and fears and how I'm right and they're wrong to protect myself. And I'm disconnected from my values. So yeah, I'm not committed to those because patterns are replaying and they're keeping me limited from being able to express my potential in a way where I actually value being that way. As far as the expanded list, before I forget, let me open this up so you guys can see. There's the expanded list. The shift that takes place with committed action is that when we develop this discipline, we're able to redirect competence towards process rather than performance. What I mean by that is that it's no longer about performing well or achieving or doing the thing, but it's about how well am I able to identify, become aware, and recalibrate or realign with my values that I've chosen. So the whole purpose is to create new and larger patterns of daily living that are aligned with your values, so that we're not just falling off the wagon, so to speak, and beating ourselves up because we didn't stick to the routine or do the thing that we wanted to do and initially said we would do. Remember, I gave the example of values being like directions. If I value moving the direction of east, there's always more east to go. So that means that no matter when my old patterns show up, as I'm learning and establishing new patterns, when they show up, sometimes I'll find myself going south. But that doesn't matter because at the end of the day, I can diffuse, reconnect with myself, accept what happened, accept where I am, be present in that moment, identify how I value being, and then recommit myself to those actions, rather than beating myself up, staying in my head, and just allowing old patterns to take over and sabotage all my success. The results and the effect that this will have when you develop this discipline more and more, combined with the others, you can see they're not an island, they all work together, but you'll have more consistency over time, which means your say-do ratio will go up, your self-confidence will go up, and everything. You'll have more resilience in the face of setbacks, because you'll know now this is a matter of recalibration and realigning and establishing new patterns. So when the pattern was set a goal, try to do the workout, stay up too late, not wake up early, fall off and beat myself up, and then abandon the goal altogether. If that was the pattern, now we start to recognize at this point where we've stayed up too late, we can then diffuse and we can interrupt that pattern by saying, no, how do I value being? Well, despite being tired and staying up last night, I value being consistent and keeping my word to myself. And so I had better make sure I go to bed next time so that I can live by this value. And you can still choose to live the value. So you'll have more resilience in the face of setbacks to establish new patterns. You'll also be able to have a lived sense of capability and agency, which will naturally satisfy this yearning for competence. That is all of them. In summary, though, inner mastery is what emerges when all 6 disciplines are working together. Again, they're not meant to be individual skills, but they're meant to work together. So for instance, diffusion is what frees the mind. Self as context is what's going to stabilize the identity. Acceptance opens the heart. Presence grounds your awareness. Values provides direction, and committed action creates momentum. So we use them together, and together they enable us to live our lives by design rather than living by default. That's one of the most valuable things that I've realized for myself, that inner mastery is, it's not eliminating pain or uncertainty or the struggles of your life like most people are trying to do because of how their egos are hardwired. It's about the ability to actually meet life fully and consciously and courageously how things are, so that then you can continue to move in the direction of what truly matters to you, rather than trying to avoid everything else and having that dictate which direction you go. As far as next steps, I'm a big proponent of giving away all the information. Truth should not have a price. And it spent me years and years, decades, to be able to discover all of this on my own, pay for help, to know the right directions, the right research and everything. And I don't want people to have to go through the same thing. I want you to be able to collapse your time horizon to know yourself so you can actually master your potential. So there's an assessment that I've created. You can assess where you're at in regards to the 6 disciplines of inner mastery, so you can see as a whole, using this model and this framework, where am I at? How well or to what degree have I mastered myself? Understanding the 6 disciplines intellectually is only the beginning. Transformation requires honest assessment, and so that's why I created it. It's called the Inner Mastery Index, and it's designed to measure how developed each of the 6 disciplines of inner mastery currently are within you. So it's going to reveal both your strengths and the specific skills that are underdeveloped, and the disciplines that you need to focus on for growth, so that you can be intentional rather than learning through trial and error. The assessment is not about labeling or judgment. I want to make that very clear because egos have a tendency to do that. It's not about that. It's about seeing clearly where you are so you can choose your next steps with intention. Awareness precedes choice, and choice precedes transformation. So what you'll walk away from taking the assessment, just to know what it's going to include and what you'll get from it, it's a clear snapshot of your current level of inner mastery, like I mentioned. You'll also get some insights into which patterns are limiting your progress. You'll also be able to walk away with direction on where to actually focus your attention for the greatest return, and a baseline so that you can actually use that to track your growth and measure it in real time, and over time. This is not meant to just be one time. This is meant to reassess over and over so you can see where you're at. So you can take the assessment. If anybody wants to take the Inner Mastery Index, let me know. I'm happy to send it over, give you the link. There's no charge or nothing like that for this, but just feel free to reach out if it's something that you are interested in. If this resonates with you and you've made it this far, then I love you. I don't know you, but genuinely, I love you. Human to human. The best thing that I've ever done for myself is come to know myself better. And my hope for you is that you resonate with this, and that this can be a model through which you can understand more truth in regards to who you are, how you're being, because your awareness of who you are is greatly going to determine how you are. And from there, that can be a foundation for your own growth and evolution, so that you can create and live a life that you actually value living. Love you all.